They tied the Apache twins for stealing bread. One quiet rancher changed their fate. The sun had just started its slow climb above the desert horizon, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and gold. Dust rose gently from the dry ground as a light breeze carried the faint smell of sagebrush and baking bread from the small town on the edge of the Arizona desert. It was a quiet morning for most people, but for two young Apache twins it was about to become a day they would never forget. The twins, barely 12 years old, had spent the night in the shadows near the outskirts of the town. Their stomachs ached from hunger and their thin clothing did little to protect them from the morning chill. They had traveled far from their family camp in search of food, hoping to find something simple to fill their empty bellies. The town, with its wooden buildings and dusty streets, looked big and frightening to them, but the smell of freshly baked bread had drawn them closer. The bakery was small, its windows fogged with flour dust, and a faint puff of smoke curled from the chimney. Inside, a woman moved quickly, arranging warm loaves on shelves, unaware of the small, trembling figures watching from the alley. The twins exchanged a nervous glance, their eyes wide with both fear and determination. They knew stealing was wrong, but hunger clouded everything else. One twin whispered, "Just one loaf and we'll go," and the other nodded, gripping his brother's hand tightly. They waited until the baker stepped outside to speak with a neighbor. Quiet as shadows, the twins slipped through the door, their small hands brushing against the soft, warm bread. They grabbed a loaf each, their hearts pounding in their chests. The smell of the bread was intoxicating, filling their senses with warmth and hope. But just as quickly as it began, their brief moment of relief ended. A shout rang out from the street. "Thieves! Stop them!" The twins froze. The baker's husband had noticed the missing loaves and raised an alarm. People poured out of their houses and shops, their expressions a mixture of anger, fear, and curiosity. The twins turned and ran, but the town's streets were narrow, and the adults moved faster than they had ever imagined. They could feel the hot gaze of the crowd behind them, and panic overtook their courage. Within minutes, they were cornered near the town square, their tiny bodies pressed against a wooden fence. The crowd closed in, voices rising in anger and accusation. "How dare they steal from us?" one man shouted. "Punish them!" another cried. The twins trembled, their hands shaking as they clutched the stolen bread. Tears ran down their dusty cheeks, and they looked around desperately for someone, anyone, to help them. But the townspeople, caught up in fear and old prejudices, ignored their pleas. A local sheriff appeared, his boots kicking up dust as he approached the twins. He was a tall man with a stern face known for being strict and quick to act. Without a word, he grabbed the twins by their arms and tied them to a post in the center of the square. The wooden post was rough against their skin and the ropes cut into their wrists. The twins winced, their eyes wide with fear as they realized the seriousness of their situation. Around them, the crowd began to whisper and murmur, some shaking their heads in disapproval, others nodding with grim satisfaction. The twins' mother, who had been searching for them since dawn, arrived at the edge of the square. She had followed the trail of footprints and the distant cries, her heart pounding with dread. She could barely recognize her children in their torn and dusty clothes, their faces pale and eyes filled with terror. She ran toward them, her voice trembling as she called their names.
"My children, please!"
"Don't hurt them." But the crowd ignored her, caught in the moment of their own anger. As she stood there, frozen with fear, she noticed the youngest child trying to tug at the rope, his small hands raw from the friction. His twin brother whispered words of comfort, trying to reassure him, though he himself was shaking. The mother's heart ached, and she felt helpless. She knew that in this town, justice often came quickly and without mercy, and she feared for her children's lives. The twins' fear was matched only by the growing tension in the square. The townspeople whispered among themselves, debating what should happen next. Some wanted to send the children away. Others suggested a harsher punishment to set an example. The sun rose higher in the sky, beating down on the wooden post and the tied twins, casting long shadows over the square. The heat added to the discomfort, and the twins squirmed in the ropes, their bodies aching and their spirits sinking. Just when it seemed that hope was lost, a quiet figure appeared at the edge of the crowd. A man, older than most of the townspeople, with rough hands and a calm face, walked slowly toward the post. He was a rancher, known for his solitary life on the outskirts of town. Most people barely knew him, but they respected him for his honesty and the quiet way he lived. As he approached, the murmurs of the crowd fell silent, and all eyes turned toward him. He did not shout or demand attention. Instead, he looked directly at the twins, his eyes filled with understanding and concern. Then he turned to the crowd and spoke, his voice steady and calm. "These are children," he said. "They are hungry, scared, and desperate. Punishing them like this will not make our town safer. It will only break them." The crowd was taken aback. No one had spoken this way, challenging their anger and fear with reason and compassion. The twins, still tied to the post, looked at the rancher with wide eyes. For the first time that morning, they felt a flicker of hope. The rancher's words reached their hearts, offering a small but powerful comfort. They could not speak, but their eyes told the story of their fear, their hunger, and their longing for mercy. The rancher knelt slightly, keeping his gaze gentle, as if he were trying to reassure them that someone cared. The mother's tears flowed freely as she watched the rancher. She had never known a man in the town to speak with such kindness, and she felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She could only hope that he would be able to protect her children from the wrath of the angry crowd. The twins' bodies shook, but they clung to each other, drawing strength from their bond and the presence of this unexpected ally. The tension in the square began to shift. The crowd, unsure of how to respond, started to listen. Murmurs of doubt replaced angry shouts. Some townspeople looked at the twins and saw not criminals, but frightened children caught in a moment of desperation. Others glanced at the rancher and realized that perhaps there was another way, a way of compassion rather than punishment. As the sun climbed higher, the twins remained tied to the post, but the fear that had gripped them began to loosen slightly. The rancher stayed close, his calm presence a shield against the growing uncertainty in the square. The twins' mother stood near him, holding her children's hands whenever she could reach them. For the first time that morning, there was a sense that maybe, just maybe, their fate could change. The twins did not understand the full weight of the moment, but they felt it in the gentle way the rancher spoke to the crowd, in the soft way he looked at them, and in the quiet strength that seemed to surround him. In that moment, a seed of hope was planted, a hope that would grow, slowly but surely, in the days to come. By the time the sun was high in the sky, the townspeople had begun to question what they had assumed at first. The twins were still tied, still frightened, but they were no longer alone. Someone had noticed their fear, their humanity, and their need for mercy. And though the day was only beginning, the first step toward a new and unexpected path had already been taken. The twins, their hands chafed and sore, clung together as the rancher quietly moved closer. Their hearts, once heavy with fear and dread, began to feel the faint warmth of hope. In a town where anger had ruled the morning, compassion had quietly begun to make its presence known. And in that quiet, unassuming moment, the course of the twins' lives, and the lessons the town would learn, had begun to shift forever. The sun climbed higher into the sky, casting a hot, glaring light over the town square. Dust swirled in the dry air, and the wooden buildings seemed to shimmer in the heat. The twins, still tied to the post, squirmed against the rough ropes that bit into their wrists. Their small bodies were stiff from fear, their stomachs aching from hunger, and their hearts pounding from the sudden chaos of the morning. They had never felt so trapped, so exposed, so vulnerable. Every face in the crowd looked angry, every shout seemed louder, and every step felt like it was closing in on them. The townspeople had gathered in numbers that made the twins feel even smaller. Farmers, shopkeepers, and even a few children watched from the edges of the crowd. The anger in the air was thick, almost like the dust that blew across the square. Many of the adults whispered about how the twins were not just children caught stealing. They were young Apache, and their presence reminded some of old fears and old grudges. That fear, combined with hunger and pride, made the townspeople's anger grow sharper by the minute. Some voices in the crowd shouted for immediate punishment. "Tie them higher," one man barked. "Let them feel what it means to steal from decent people," another shouted. They should be made to work for every loaf, so they learn respect. The twins, clinging to each other, tried to understand the words. The meanings were distant to their young minds, but the tone was clear. They were in danger, and there seemed to be no way out. Their small bodies trembled, their faces pale, and their eyes darted from one adult to another, hoping for some sign of mercy. The mother, standing a few feet away, felt helpless. Her heart pounded in her chest as she watched the people she had once known as neighbors grow cruel in their anger. She tried to step closer, but the crowd formed a barrier between her and her children.
Please don't hurt them,
she cried, her voice breaking.
They're just children.
They are hungry. Have mercy. Her pleas, however, were mostly drowned out by the voices of those who had convinced themselves that punishment was necessary. The twins whispered to each other in low, shaky voices. "Do you think anyone will help us?" asked the smaller twin. His older brother shook his head, biting his lip to hold back tears. "I don't know," he admitted. "We have to stay together, no matter what." Their whispered promises were all they had in that moment, a fragile shield against the storm of anger surrounding them. Meanwhile, the townspeople continued to argue among themselves. Some remembered stories of Apache raids from years past, though these tales were often exaggerated. Others believed in strict justice, convinced that letting the twins go without punishment would invite more theft and disorder. Fear, anger, and prejudice blended into a dangerous mix, and the twins' small, terrified faces were the focus of it all. Then, from the edge of the square, the quiet rancher who had spoken earlier began to move again. His steps were slow but steady, and his calm presence seemed to cut through the tension like a gentle wind. The crowd, initially irritated by his interference, now watched him with curiosity. No one had seen him act in the public eye for years, and his reputation as a fair, quiet man gave his words weight, even if people were reluctant to admit it. The rancher looked at the twins with compassion, kneeling slightly so that he was closer to their level. "Children do not understand hunger the way adults do," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "They are not criminals. They are scared and desperate. Look at them. Can you see the fear in their eyes? Do you think it is right to punish them so harshly?" His words were soft enough to be kind, but firm enough to make the crowd pause. Some people shifted uncomfortably. Others muttered under their breath, unsure of how to respond to someone challenging their anger. A few brave townspeople began to nod quietly, remembering the faces of their own children or grandchildren. They understood deep down that what the twins had done was wrong, yes, but they also understood hunger and desperation. Slowly, a few voices began to speak up in support of the rancher. Maybe we should not be so quick," one woman said hesitantly. "They are just children." Another man added, "We can teach them without hurting them." The twins listened, though they could barely comprehend the words over the pounding of their hearts. For the first time since being tied to the post, they felt the faintest glimmer of hope. The rope still chafed their wrists, and the sun still beat down on them, but someone was speaking for them. Someone who understood that fear and hunger did not make them bad. They clung to each other more tightly, whispering thanks in their own quiet way. The mother's tears continued to flow as she watched the change in the crowd. She could see doubt spreading among the people who had moments ago shouted for punishment. Their expressions softened, their voices lowered, and for a brief moment she imagined her children being free again. She prayed silently, hoping that the rancher's influence would be enough to protect them from harm. The tension, however, did not disappear entirely. Some men in the crowd still shook their heads and muttered angrily. "Why should we care? They are not like us," one said. Another added, "We cannot let stealing go unpunished or everyone will start stealing." These voices, though quieter now, reminded everyone that the town's anger and fear were not easily erased. The twins' situation remained precarious, and their fates hung in the balance. The rancher, sensing the lingering danger, stepped a little closer to the post. "I will take responsibility for them," he said calmly, addressing both the angry crowd and the worried sheriff. "I will teach them work, responsibility, and respect. I will feed them and guide them, but I will not let fear or anger dictate their punishment." His words carried authority and sincerity. The twins' hearts leapt at the promise, though they did not fully understand what it meant. Still, the thought that someone might protect them filled them with a courage they had not known they possessed. The sheriff looked at the rancher with surprise. He had not expected anyone to step forward and offer such a solution. The crowd, sensing a moment of decision, grew silent. Some people muttered their approval, others remained skeptical, but all realized that the quiet rancher was not someone to be ignored. The twins' mother stepped closer, tears streaming down her face, and whispered, "Thank you. Thank you for helping my children." The rancher gave her a small nod, acknowledging her gratitude without drawing attention to himself. The twins, still tied but now surrounded by a growing sense of cautious hope, began to calm slightly. Their small hands, raw from the ropes, rested against the wooden post, and their breathing slowly steadied. They clung to each other, whispering promises of staying brave. The heat of the day and the angry eyes of the crowd had not vanished, but the rancher's presence created a small circle of safety around them. As the morning turned to noon, the sun rose higher, and the shadows in the square grew shorter. The townspeople, once united in their anger, now found themselves divided. Some had seen the twins' fear and the truth of their desperation. Others still worried about what letting the children go might mean for the town. But no one could deny the quiet courage of the rancher, whose calm voice and careful words had begun to change hearts. The twins, their bodies sore and their spirits weary, could sense the shift in the crowd. It was not a complete victory, but it was the first step towards safety. The rope still held them, but they no longer felt entirely alone. The mother remained close, brushing the sweat and dust from their faces and whispering words of encouragement. And in the midst of the tense square, the rancher stood as a reminder that courage and compassion could sometimes speak louder than fear and anger. By mid-afternoon, the atmosphere in the square had softened just enough that a plan could be made. The rancher quietly explained to the sheriff that he would take the twins into his care, teach them the value of work, and protect them from harm. The twins' mother watched with relief and disbelief as the possibility of mercy and safety began to replace the fear that had dominated their morning. For the first time in hours, there was hope. The twins, still tied but now guided by the promise of protection, realized that the anger of the town could be tempered by understanding. They felt a small, cautious sense of relief, knowing that someone had seen their fear, their humanity, and their need for help. The tension in the square was not entirely gone, but it had shifted in a way that no one had expected. The quiet rancher had planted a seed of change, and for the twins, that seed offered the first glimpse of a future that might not be filled with punishment and fear, but with learning, care, and the possibility of a better life. The town square had fallen into a tense, uneasy silence. The sun was high in the sky, beating down on the wooden buildings, the dusty streets, and the twins tied to the post. The children's small bodies shivered, partly from exhaustion and partly from fear. Their wrists were raw from the ropes, their clothes torn from their desperate attempts to escape, and their eyes wide with the knowledge that the anger of the crowd could turn deadly in an instant. But then the rancher stepped forward again. He moved slowly, deliberately, not rushing but not hesitating either. His calm, steady presence seemed to demand attention even from the most furious townspeople. He had watched the morning unfold from a distance, seen the fear in the twins' eyes, and now he knew that the moment to act had come. He stopped a few feet from the post and looked directly at the children, his face soft but serious. "You two are not bad," he said gently, his voice carrying across the square. "You are hungry. You are scared, and you are children who made a mistake. That is all." The twins blinked at him, their lips trembling. They had never heard anyone speak to them so calmly, so kindly, in the midst of such anger. They wanted to believe him, and just hearing his words made their hearts pound with hope. The rancher turned to face the crowd. "I know many of you are angry," he continued. "I understand your fear, but think for a moment. What will punishing them truly accomplish? Will it keep your homes safe? Will it make your bread more plentiful? Will it bring peace to your town?" His words were simple, but each one carried weight. The townspeople exchanged uneasy glances. Some began to lower their voices, some shifted their weight from foot to foot, unsure how to respond. One older man, his face lined with years of worry and hard work, muttered, "They're stealing from us. They shouldn't go unpunished." The rancher nodded slowly. "Yes, stealing is wrong," he said. "But children often steal when they are hungry. They do not understand the full consequences of their actions. Our responsibility is to guide them, to teach them, not to destroy them." The twins clung to each other more tightly. The words were simple, but they carried a truth that the children could feel deep in their hearts. They wanted to be forgiven, to be understood, and the rancher was the first person to offer them that possibility. He knelt slightly, lowering himself to their level without breaking his calm authority. "You are safe now," he said. "I will make sure no harm comes to you, but you must trust me and listen." The mother, standing just outside the circle of onlookers, felt a glimmer of hope. Tears streaked her dusty cheeks as she whispered prayers of gratitude. For hours, she had watched her children's fear, had felt helpless and desperate. Now, for the first time, someone in the town had stepped forward with courage and compassion, offering a path to safety. She pressed her hand to her heart, silently thanking the rancher. But not everyone in the crowd was convinced. Some muttered that the rancher was taking an unnecessary risk. "Why should he care?" one man grumbled. "They are not his responsibility." Another added, "This will make trouble for the town. We cannot just let them go." The rancher's calm gaze did not waver. He understood the fear, but he also understood what was right. He took a deep breath and spoke again, his voice carrying over the murmurs. "Think about what these children could become if they are guided and taught instead of punished," he said. "Think about what it would mean for our town if we chose mercy over fear. I am offering to take responsibility for them, to feed them, to teach them work and respect. Is that not a better path than anger?" Some in the crowd hesitated. They were raised to believe in swift justice, to fear anyone who was different from them, to act quickly and harshly. But the rancher's words planted a seed of doubt, a question they could not ignore. Could punishment truly solve the problem, or would it only teach the children to fear and hate? Slowly, the murmurs shifted from anger to uncertainty. The twins, their faces streaked with dirt and tears, dared to hope. The younger one whispered to his brother, "Do you think he will help us?" The older twin nodded slightly, his voice barely audible.
I think maybe he can.
Their hands, still tied, pressed together tightly. The small bond they shared was their only comfort in that crowded, tense square. The rancher's gaze softened as he looked at them. "I can help you," he said quietly. "I can make sure you did not go hungry. I can teach you to work, to earn your bread. But you must trust me. Do you understand?" The twins nodded, their eyes shining with a mixture of fear and relief. It was not a complete solution, but it was hope, and it felt like a lifeline. Seeing the children's reaction, the mother took a step closer, tears falling freely. "Please," she said, her voice trembling. "Take them. Teach them.
Keep them safe. They have already suffered enough."
The rancher nodded. He understood the weight of her words, the desperation behind them, and he felt a quiet responsibility settle on his shoulders. The sheriff, who had been watching quietly, stepped forward. He looked at the twins, at the mother, and then at the rancher. "If you are willing to take responsibility for them," he said slowly, "then I will allow it. But you must promise to care for them and teach them right from wrong." The rancher's face was calm, but his eyes were determined. "I promise," he said. "I will care for them, guide them, and protect them." A hush fell over the square. The anger that had filled the morning was fading, replaced by a mixture of relief and cautious hope. Some townspeople shook their heads, still skeptical, but many nodded quietly, realizing that the rancher's plan made more sense than punishment. The children, still tied to the post, felt a small weight lift from their shoulders. For the first time that morning, they imagined the possibility of safety, of care, of learning instead of fear. The rancher moved closer and began to untie the ropes. His hands were careful, gentle, making sure not to hurt the children further. As the ropes fell away, the twins rubbed their wrists and looked up at him with wide, grateful eyes. The weight of fear began to ease, replaced by cautious relief. They were still weak, still hungry, and still unsure of what would come next. But the immediate threat had passed. The mother rushed forward, wrapping her arms around her children. She whispered words of comfort, telling them that everything would be okay, that someone was taking care of them. The twins clung to her, their tears mixing with the dust on their faces. Around them, the crowd began to disperse slowly, some nodding to the rancher in silent thanks, others murmuring doubts but recognizing that the anger of the morning had lost its power. The rancher led the twins and their mother toward his small ranch on the outskirts of town. It was a place of open fields, grazing cattle, and modest wooden buildings. The children looked around with wide eyes, seeing a world so different from the dusty streets of the town square. For the first time, they saw the possibility of work, learning, and safety. They were tired, hungry, and scared, but a small spark of hope burned within them. As they walked, the rancher spoke quietly to the children. "You will learn many things here," he said. "How to care for animals, how to plant crops, how to work hard and earn your bread. But you will also learn something more important. You will learn that kindness can be stronger than fear, and that courage does not always come from shouting or fighting. Sometimes it comes from helping someone when no one else will." The twins listened, their small hearts absorbing every word. They wanted to believe him, and slowly they began to feel the first flicker of trust. The fear that had gripped them since dawn was beginning to fade, replaced by the warmth of hope and the knowledge that someone had chosen to stand for them. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun was beginning to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the fields. The twins were tired, but they walked with a new sense of possibility. They had survived the anger of the town, endured the fear of punishment, and now had someone to guide them, protect them, and teach them. The ranchers' quiet courage had changed the course of their day, and perhaps the course of their lives. As they stepped onto the soft earth of the ranch, the twins could not yet imagine all that lay ahead. They could not see the full path of learning, growth, and care that awaited them. But they could feel, for the first time in hours, that someone had believed in them, and that belief was enough to give them strength. The angry voices of the town were fading behind them, replaced by the quiet promise of guidance, safety, and the chance to grow into something better. And so, under the watchful eye of the quiet rancher, the twins began the first chapter of a new life, one where fear and anger no longer ruled, and where kindness, courage, and compassion had the power to change fate. The ranch lay just beyond the edge of the dusty town, surrounded by wide-open fields where the wind blew freely, and the sky stretched endlessly in shades of blue. The sun was beginning its slow descent toward the horizon, casting a warm glow over the grazing cattle and the modest wooden buildings that made up the ranch. For the twins, the world beyond the town square was something they had never truly imagined, a place of quiet space, open air, and the promise of safety. As they walked beside the rancher, their small feet dragging from fatigue, the twins could hardly take in everything at once. The rancher moved steadily, speaking gently to them as they went. "This will be your home for now," he said. "Here you will learn many things, and I will help you. But it will not always be easy. Life requires work, patience, and care." The twins nodded silently. They were too tired to speak much, but the calmness in his voice gave them comfort they had not felt since the morning began. The rancher led them first to a small wooden barn. Its doors creaked on old hinges, and the smell of hay and animals filled the air. Inside, cows and horses stirred quietly, watching the newcomers with curious eyes. The twins had never been so close to large animals before. Their eyes widened as the rancher explained how the animals lived, how they needed care, and how every living thing depended on someone to look after it. "Tomorrow you will help feed them," he said. "You will learn to give water, gather hay, and care for the animals. You must do your best, but I will guide you every step of the way." The twins listened intently. The idea of work was foreign to them, but it felt different from punishment. This was not meant to hurt them. It was meant to teach them responsibility. That small difference made a world of change in how they felt about the day and their future. After the barn, the rancher showed them the garden. Rows of vegetables, tomatoes, corn, and beans, grew under the sun, their green leaves shining with health. "These plants feed us and teach us patience," the rancher said. "They do not grow overnight. They need care, water, and time. Life is a lot like this garden. You will see." The twins looked at the plants with wonder. They had never thought about how much work went into growing food, or how patience could make something small turn into something important. The rancher then led them to a small cabin that would be their living space. Inside, the air smelled of wood and warmth. A simple bed, a few blankets, and a small table made the cabin feel safe and welcoming. "This will be your room," the rancher said. "You will keep it clean and take care of your things." Respecting your space and your belongings is part of learning responsibility. The twins nodded, feeling a strange comfort in having a place to call their own for the first time. That evening, the rancher prepared a simple meal for them. Warm bread, vegetables from the garden, and some fresh milk filled their small bowls. The twins ate hungrily, savoring every bite. For the first time since that fateful morning, their stomachs were full, and a sense of safety settled over them. They looked at the rancher with quiet gratitude, their eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and curiosity. After the meal, they sat around the small table, listening as the rancher shared stories of his life on the ranch, his experiences with animals, and lessons he had learned from both mistakes and successes. He spoke of patience, kindness, and the importance of hard work. The twins were fascinated. Every word seemed to open a new window into a world they had never known. For the first time, they felt the possibility of growing into something better than their past, something stronger than the fear that had haunted them. The next morning, the twins awoke early to the sound of birds and the soft lowing of cattle. The sun was just rising, painting the fields in gold and orange light. The rancher was already awake, tending to the animals and preparing the morning chores. "Come, it is time to start learning," he said with a gentle smile. The twins rubbed their eyes and followed him, unsure of what to expect, but eager to see what the day would bring. Their first task was to help feed the cows. The rancher showed them how to carry buckets of water, scatter hay for the animals, and speak softly to calm the larger creatures. The twins stumbled at first, their hands awkward and unsteady, but the rancher guided them patiently. "It is okay to make mistakes," he said. "That is how we learn. The important thing is to keep trying." The twins began to understand that work could be a way to build confidence, not just a punishment. As the days passed, the twins learned more about life on the ranch. They helped plant seeds in the garden, learning how to water them carefully and check for signs of growth. They tended to chickens, gathering eggs, and learned the importance of responsibility, patience, and care. Each day they grew stronger, both in body and spirit. The rancher praised their efforts and guided them gently when they stumbled. Slowly, the fear that had gripped them in the town square began to fade, replaced by a sense of pride in what they could accomplish. The twins also learned about honesty and respect. The rancher explained that taking care of others, whether animals, plants, or people, meant being truthful and dependable. "If you make a mistake, admit it," he said. "If you hurt something or someone, try to make it right. That is what makes a person strong." The twins listened carefully, realizing that these lessons were different from the punishments they had feared. Here, mistakes were not met with anger, but with guidance. The mother, who stayed nearby to help care for the children, watched with relief and gratitude. She could see the change in her children's faces, the tension in their bodies slowly easing, the fear in their eyes replaced by curiosity and hope. She could finally imagine a future where her children were safe, learning, and growing. The rancher's quiet dedication had begun to heal the wounds of the morning and show a path forward. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned shades of pink and purple, the rancher gathered the twins and their mother outside. "Look at the work you have done today," he said. "See the garden, see the animals you helped care for. You made a difference. Every day, you will grow a little stronger, learn a little more, and become a person who can face challenges with courage." The twins smiled shyly, realizing that for the first time their efforts mattered. Weeks turned into months. The twins became skilled at caring for the animals, planting seeds, and completing daily chores. They developed routines, learned to take responsibility for their work, and began to understand the value of patience and perseverance. Their bond with the rancher deepened, built on trust, guidance, and quiet lessons that went far beyond words. They began to smile more, laugh more, and even share small stories of their past with him. The rancher, too, found something changing within himself. He had always lived a quiet life, but guiding the twins gave him a renewed sense of purpose. He saw their potential, their eagerness to learn, and their capacity for growth. He realized that his choice to intervene that day in the town square had not only saved the children, but had also enriched his own life in ways he had never expected. One bright morning, as the twins worked in the garden, the rancher approached them. "Do you see how far you have come?" he asked. "You have learned so much, not just about work, but about patience, care, and courage. You are no longer the frightened children who were tied in the town square. You are stronger, smarter, and capable of great things." The twins looked at each other and then back at him, their faces glowing with pride. For the first time, they truly believed in themselves. The mother, watching from nearby, felt tears of joy and relief stream down her cheeks. She had never imagined that such kindness and guidance could change her children's lives so profoundly. The rancher had not only protected them, but had given them the tools to grow into capable, responsible, and kind individuals. The lessons they learned on the ranch went far beyond chores. They learned how to face life's challenges with courage and integrity. As the sun set over the ranch, painting the fields in golden light, the twins stood together, looking out over the land they had begun to care for. The wind whispered through the grass, and the cattle moved quietly in the distance. They were no longer just frightened children. They were young people who had been given a second chance, a chance to grow, to learn, and to live a life filled with hope and purpose. And so, under the quiet guidance of the rancher, the twins continued their journey. Every day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new opportunities to grow. They learned that life required work, but that work could also bring joy, confidence, and pride. They discovered that courage was not always loud, and that kindness could be stronger than anger. And most importantly, they learned that someone believing in them could change the course of their lives forever. The years passed quietly on the ranch, yet each day felt full of life, learning, and growth for the twins. What had started as a frightening morning in the dusty town square had blossomed into something entirely new, a life of purpose, care, and hope. The twins, once timid and hungry, had grown stronger both in body and spirit. Their small hands, once raw from ropes and fear, were now steady and skilled, able to work with the animals, tend the garden, and help with the chores that kept the ranch running smoothly. Each morning they woke with the sun, the golden light spilling across the fields, and the soft sound of cattle and birds greeting the day. Their routines were simple but meaningful, feeding the animals, gathering eggs, tending the crops, and helping wherever they were needed. The rancher, still calm and steady as ever, guided them with patience and quiet encouragement.
"Every day you work," he said, "you grow a little stronger."
Not just your hands, but your heart, your mind, and your courage. The twins had learned to listen, not just to words, but to the rhythm of life on the ranch and the lessons it offered. The garden had become their pride. Rows of tomatoes, beans, corn, and squash flourished under their careful hands. The twins learned how to check the soil, water the plants just enough, and protect them from pests. They discovered that patience was as important as effort, and that small actions repeated consistently could produce something remarkable. With every sprouting seed, they felt a sense of accomplishment they had never known before. The garden became more than just plants. It became a symbol of their own growth, a reminder that even small beginnings could flourish with care and attention. Caring for the animals taught them empathy. They learned to feed the cows, horses, and chickens with gentleness, to notice when one of the animals was sick or scared, and to comfort them. They began to understand that responsibility was not just about doing tasks, but about understanding the needs of others and acting with kindness. The rancher often watched quietly, letting them discover solutions themselves, but always ready to guide when necessary. "A kind hand can calm a frightened heart," he would say. The twins repeated those words to themselves, sometimes aloud as they worked, feeling them sink deeper into their hearts. Life on the ranch also taught them honesty and trust. Every mistake they made, whether spilling water for the animals or dropping a basket of vegetables, was met with gentle correction. The rancher encouraged them to admit their mistakes and think of ways to fix them. "No one is perfect," he said, "but honesty and effort make you strong. A mistake is only a lesson in disguise." The twins embraced this philosophy, learning that failure was not something to fear, but something to learn from. This lesson stayed with them long after their hands had stopped fumbling with buckets and tools. Over time, the twins began to see themselves differently. They were no longer the frightened children tied to a post in the town square, shivering with fear and hunger. They were capable, responsible, and proud of their accomplishments. Their confidence grew with each day, quietly but steadily, like the crops in their garden. They smiled more often, laughed more freely, and spoke with curiosity and thoughtfulness about the world around them. The rancher had given them not just survival, but a path to thrive, and they walked it with determination. The mother watched with quiet amazement. Her children, once fragile and frightened, had grown into capable young people who carried themselves with dignity and kindness. She often sat outside the cabin looking at them tending the animals or working in the garden, and felt a deep sense of gratitude for the rancher's guidance. She had once feared for their lives, had once thought that punishment would destroy them, but now she saw them thriving. The rancher's quiet courage and steady guidance had transformed not just her children, but the entire family. Even the townspeople who had once called for harsh punishment noticed the change. Some would occasionally visit the ranch or pass by, and they saw the twins working diligently, caring for animals and tending the garden. They began to recognize the results of kindness and patience, seeing that the children had learned responsibility, respect, and hard work. Slowly, the town itself seemed to understand that punishment was not always the answer, and that giving someone a chance could yield results far greater than fear ever could. One bright morning, the rancher called the twins to the edge of the field. The sun was rising, casting a warm golden glow over the land. "Look at what you have accomplished," he said, gesturing to the thriving garden and the calm, healthy animals grazing nearby. "Everything you see here is because of your effort, your patience, and your care. But more importantly, this is only the beginning. The lessons you have learned here, the courage, the kindness, the responsibility, will guide you for the rest of your lives." The twins looked at each other, then back at the rancher. They realized he was right. They had grown in ways they could never have imagined. The fear that had gripped them in the town square, the shame of being tied to a post for something they did not fully understand, had been replaced with strength, knowledge, and hope. The rancher's quiet intervention had changed their lives forever. As the seasons changed, the twins learned more about the world and their place in it. Winter brought challenges with cold and snow, and the twins learned to prepare for the harsh weather, to gather firewood, and to care for animals during storms. Spring brought new growth in the garden, new challenges, and new lessons. Summer brought long days of hard work, sweat, and satisfaction. And autumn brought harvest, a time to see the results of their effort and celebrate their accomplishments. Each season taught them something new about patience, resilience, and the rewards of effort. One day the rancher gathered the twins again and spoke softly. "You are no longer children in need of guidance. You have learned to care for others, to work hard, and to face challenges with courage. The town may still hold fear, but you have shown that kindness and patience are stronger than anger. Remember that always." The twins listened intently, understanding that this was not the end of their learning, but a celebration of how far they had come. The twins never forgot the fear of that morning when they had been tied to the post. They remembered the anger of the crowd, the ache of hunger, and the terror of being alone in the world. But they also remembered the calm courage of the rancher, the kindness he showed, and the opportunities he gave them to learn, grow, and heal. That memory became a powerful lesson, that even in the darkest moments, someone's belief in you could change everything. Over time, the twins became mentors to other children in the area, sharing what they had learned about responsibility, kindness, and hard work. They showed that mistakes did not define a person, but actions, choices, and effort did. The rancher watched with quiet pride, knowing that the lesson he had offered so many years ago had taken root and would continue to flourish through the lives of the twins and those they touched. The mother, now older and calmer, often looked at her children and smiled. She had once feared for their lives, once trembled at the thought of what punishment might bring. Now she saw them standing tall, confident, and kind-hearted. They were a living testament to the power of mercy, patience, and guidance. The rancher had changed their fate, and they carried that gift forward in everything they did. Years later, when the twins had grown into young adults, they walked through the fields together, side by side. They spoke of the lessons they had learned, the hard work they had endured, and the kindness they had been shown. "Remember when we were tied in the town square?" one asked, smiling at the memory that once caused so much fear. The other nodded. "I can hardly believe it now. We have come so far." And they understood that the quiet courage of one man had opened the door to a life full of possibility. The rancher, now older and slower in his steps, watched them from the porch of his cabin. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that his simple act of compassion had transformed not just the twins' lives, but also the lives of everyone who had witnessed their journey. He had offered guidance, care, and a chance, and the twins had embraced it fully, proving that hope, patience, and kindness could overcome fear, anger, and prejudice. And so the twins' story became one of inspiration, a story of courage, of mercy, and of second chances. They learned that life was not about the mistakes they had made, but about how they responded, how they grew, and how they used the lessons they had been given. The rancher's quiet intervention had changed the course of their lives, and in doing so, he had left an enduring mark on the town, on their family, and on the twins themselves. In the end, the twins understood something profound. That life could be harsh, that fear and anger could surround you, but that one act of belief, one act of courage, could change everything. And for them, that one quiet rancher had done just that.